Ladies and gentlemen, Big Hairy News.
Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Chewy.
Kia ora, Pat. How was that new intro?
That
was like it's like, I don't know, like when you rearrange your room, all the same shit's there, but it's like a whole new room.
You have to be very careful not to call all the lovely people in the chat the same shit who are here. We've talked about that.
That's an interesting read on what I've just said, Pat. Very interesting.
Hey team, welcome to the show. Technically, welcome to show 499. It's show number 499. That means tomorrow, and 4, carry the 1, it'll be show number 500. So, a bit of a milestone, I guess, you know, if you think about doing, we were actually doing 5 shows a week at the start. But, you know, at the 4 shows a week, 500 episodes is 125 weeks. So that's about 1.5 years. If my maths is right. Is that about 6 months, 8 months, something like that? 125 weeks.
It's a lot. I still get a kick out of the reaction of people that maybe just see our clips on Facebook and YouTube, just the little bit, and on TikTok, and when I'm talking to them, and they're like, "Oh, you know, so how often do you do it?" And you're like, "Oh, 4 nights a week. It's usually 90 minutes." People are like, "Jesus, that's a lot."
Yeah,
and it is. It's a lot.
It's funny though. It's a lot, and yet many nights we have to restrict the things we're talking about because there's so much going on. Like I watch a bit of I think it's Sam Cedar Majority Report, and they do a live show every day for 2 to 2.5 hours, and they take calls every single day and that sort of thing. So it's like it's not difficult to do that. So yeah, I get that. But no, so tomorrow's 500. Look, shall I be honest with you? I think it's 500. There's 400. This is the 499th one in the playlist, which means unless I've missed a couple along the way, we'll just call tomorrow the 500th. That's what we're going to do. Yeah, so a bit of fun. How was your weekend, man?
Pretty quiet. I am a little bit burned out. No, not necessarily for this, but just generally work and all of that sort of stuff. So really appreciate a nice weekend for a change. I got some stuff done. Took the dog down to the beach for a run around. And that was about it. Just pretty chill.
Yeah. I'm just looking at my watch. It's giving me a message. We've got Ricardo March joining us this evening to respond to some of the stuff that this government's been talking about. Apparently, we know how to solve child poverty, Chewy, right? We know how to solve it. We know the dollar figure it will take, the investment it will take to eradicate child poverty. And guess what this government said about it?
No thanks.
They went, nah.
Unsubscribe.
Nah.
No.
We know. We know all about that. So what we'll probably do, Ricardo's just landed, I was going to say in Wellington. He's either just landed in Wellington or he's left Wellington and he's landed home. Yeah, so maybe what we'll do is we'll start off with the story because I've got a bit of reading for you to do off an article involving Louise Upston. Upston, is that right? Yeah, that sounds right. And then he'll hopefully join us in the next 5-7 minutes and we can have a chat to it. But before we do that, my one thing from the weekend, I finally got myself to the gym. Joined the gym, got COVID, spent 2 weeks recovering from COVID, third time. And so I went Friday night and it took me until today to be able to feel my arms again. So probably go again tomorrow. Go 3 times a week. That's cool. Yep. All right, team. Yeah, so come join us tomorrow night. I mean, I don't think we're going to do anything special. I don't think there's going to be cake. Maybe there's cake, but I don't think there's going to be cake. But It will be a regular show with a little bit of kind of, isn't that nice from us on this side? Isn't that nice that we've made it this far? Bunch of stuff to talk about tonight. The assisted dying review is happening at the moment, the ACT. Interesting, because I've got some thoughts around that. When you watch a parent go through quite a long, drawn out death, or anyone, not just a parent, you can be given some thoughts around that. So we'll do that as well. And also child poverty, like I said, and also David Seymour's, his new Ministry for Regulations has basically come out saying what he's trying to do is not okay. So David Seymour's ministry is not in favour of David Seymour's practices and policies. Have a look at that. And look, the other thing is there was an interesting stand-up with Christopher Luxon today. I haven't actually had a chance to look at the stand-up because I was working on this show all afternoon, but I've had multiple messages from people saying Luxon did not perform well, and so we might have a very quick chat about that tonight, but probably focus on that properly tomorrow night. I'll have a look at the full 40 minutes so you don't have to, because that's what we do around here. Louise Upston rejects the official advice. I mean, saying.
Oh.
$3 billion a year needed to fix child poverty. Right, let's have a bit of a look what's going on. And as we're doing this, Ricardo's finding a place for himself at the airport to sort of set up, and he's going to respond to this as well. The coalition government disagrees with advice. Strange, because they're always normally so keen to follow official advice by officials that $3 billion a year is needed to reach the country's child poverty reduction target. Minister for Child Poverty Reduction, Louise Upston, said the government was taking a different approach to the previous Labor government. She told RNZ the government was focused on growing the economy, improving health and education outcomes, and getting more households into work to bring down child poverty. So basically the neoliberal look on the world that just get off the benefit and just go and work. Just get a job. You know this, how unemployment's going up at the moment, and just go and get a job. Get yourself get yourselves out of when does that flower? I think it flowers about 3 weeks after Labor comes in, doesn't it? So what they're trying to do is build the economy and get people off benefits and get people in employed work. Rather than welfare, they say, payments and tax, rather than welfare payments and tax credit changes, which she says were pursued by the previous Labor government. Under the previous administration, a long-term goal of mid-2028 was set to reduce the number of children experiencing material hardship from 13.3% to 6%. Officials presented Upston with two alternative targets for 2028 that they believed could be achieved. However, Upston told RNZ the government, quote, disagreed with the advice and this approach as it would further entrench long-term welfare dependency and the number of children growing up in benefit-dependent households. It's funny, there's that other thing that we could start talking about at some stage. You know, that thing we talked about last week, the universal basic income, how everyone gets it and it brings kids out of poverty. That would be a plan as well. Then it wouldn't be what they say is a benefit-dependent home. She said $3 billion price tag was based on assumptions of, quote, what it would cost to carry on the previous government's approach through the changes to welfare payments and tax credits. We know the previous government approach was not working because all three primary measures of child poverty increased on its watch. In 2023, the number of children in material hardship increased by 4,100 over its 6 years. Labor tinkered with the welfare payments but did not manage the economy, which saw any progress on child poverty targets quickly erased by the cost of living crisis. I think we've got one more little bit to read before we grab Ricardo. Upston said Treasury modelling showed investments in budget 2024 towards health, education and employment are estimated to lift around 17,000 children out of poverty on all the after-housing costs, primary measured by 2026, 2027. We know this approach works because during the last 4 full years of the previous national-led government, from 2012-13 to 16-17, the number of children in material hardship fell by 56,200, she said. In a written statement, Child Poverty Action Group, those people who are kind of specifically looking for helping children in poverty, the executive officer there said they could accept ministers may have different approaches, but Upston had not provided any compelling evidence her plan would work. This is what they said. Not only has the minister rejected official advice, she has not provided any solid evidence, modelling or data that shows her chosen path will result in us meeting the 2028 goal of having child poverty. That was what she said. Of halving, sorry, I said halving child poverty. She said, I should do this. This is my problem. I've got the wrong glass on. I should just do that. It makes it a lot easier, doesn't it? She said Upston had not only rejected official advice, she had also rejected two other specific options presented to her and instead doubled down on the more ambiguous plan of cutting taxes and growing the economy in order to lift children out of poverty. We know that ending child poverty is the right and compassionate thing to do. We have signed up as a country to halve child poverty and ensure all children have what they need to live up to their potential. The Minister of Child Poverty Reduction needs to be the greatest champion. That is what was the report through RNZ today. And let's welcome to the show from the Greens, Ricardo Menéndez March. Ricardo, good evening to you, sir, and welcome.
Good evening. Straight from the
Well, you obviously know the article, and if you hadn't read it yourself, you got half of it while I was there. What about just your chance for a response to what Louise Upston is saying?
Oh, I mean, frankly, it's astounding to hear the minister call her targets unrealistic, or the previous targets unrealistic, and at the same time say that investing $3 billion is completely unfeasible when the government decided to basically spend that same amount each year on tax cuts for landlords.
Yep.
I think to me this just shows that, like with everything, how we choose to spend and invest things is our political choices, and we just need to not buy this lie from successive governments that poverty is just this thing we've got to accept when the evidence, the advice, and the solutions are there, which are things like acknowledging that we've set benefits below the poverty line. That's an absolute choice. It's not like things have to be that way. So I just think the minister's straight up not being honest when she's claiming that investing $3 billion to end child poverty is unrealistic.
It seems that the path we've chosen, I'm going back to the article now, will result in us meeting the 2028 goal of halving child poverty. Have we been on a track for that before these guys got in? Was Labor on a track to halve it? And if not, what do we need to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, so look, Labor, in our view, didn't do enough to reduce child poverty. We were always very upfront on our criticism to the Labor government when it came to addressing child poverty. Sure, the pandemic complicated things and it increased inequality, but in some ways that was part of the response from the government to the pandemic in the way that, for example, we had that two-tier benefit that meant that some families were still in poverty. The answers are actually not complicated. It looks like increasing benefits above the poverty line. It looks like extending the working families package to all caregivers, not just those in paid employment, because caregiving is work. And it looks like building more public housing. It's not like rocket science in some ways, which is almost the most depressing thing. It's relatively simple policy interventions that have been talked about for decades now. And politicians have just been too timid and too unwilling to implement those things, which is a huge shame. And the end result, we've got to remember, is beyond the statistics, it's real people's lives. It's children who are growing up in damn cold homes. It's children that are going to hospital for preventable diseases, and those costs are effectively passed on to other parts of our system, such as education, health, and eventually, many young people ending up being criminalized because of the way their upbringing ended up being.
It seems that eradicating child poverty is literally a fence at the top of the cliff. There are lots of downstream effects that'll help with that. Is that fair?
I mean, I'm going to say a very neoliberal argument, but it's an investment that pays off later down the line, if that makes sense, because we're effectively not spending all this money and then doing interventions later down the line for things we could have prevented. I mean, I think the most obvious one is health. We know that poverty is really linked to your health, and if you end up developing a series of respiratory diseases, for example, when you're really young, that could leave you with a massive health bill later down the line. But I mean, all the research also shows that like your first 3 years of life massively determine how you're going to turn up later down the line, both in terms of health and educational outcomes, etc. And so this is why making sure that we don't allow for any child to live in poverty is really important. Even for myself, I really believe that we also need to actually take a family poverty lens rather than assuming that we just talk about child poverty because children are these sort of like agentless beings who've never made a mistake and they never deserve to be in poverty, whereas the rhetoric is that somehow adults do. So my belief and the Greens believes that we shouldn't accept poverty, period, whether it's a child or an adult. But we do have this law around child poverty to measure and to have these targets, and therefore we should be committed to addressing those.
I guess if you take kids out of child poverty, then that implies the family would have to be out of poverty as well, though, way. Is there like a double whammy there? Because you can't have the kid out of child poverty and mum and dad still being in poverty.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this
Yeah.
is why I think taking a family poverty lens is more useful. And we've got to remember that, we'll still have people who don't have children and who live in poverty. And I don't think we should tolerate and accept that either. I think, part of changing the narrative on just talking about child poverty is taking away the sort of, again, neoliberal view that people who are adults and have made choices deserve to be in poverty, when actually a lot of the reasons why they're in poverty is because of policy making. It's because of higher rents that are a direct consequence of housing policies that subsequent governments have implemented. But the point being here is that yes, we should take a family poverty approach. You can't have a child out of poverty and a parent in poverty. That makes no sense.
Chewy, mate, jump in.
I think this is a really good example of a government that knows the cost of everything but the value of nothing. That they don't see, as you mentioned, those downstream effects, the lessening of pressure on our health system, the better outcomes they get in the education system that would follow them through life. But we can't look at less than 1% of our GDP and go, yeah, that's a worthwhile goal to do. It just seems so glaringly obvious. And I mean, there's people in the chat that have pointed out that Minister Upston has experience as a solo mum. And again, this is sort of hitting out at her lived experience, that somehow she's like, oh, well, I did it, so everybody can. That seems to be prevalent in this government.
I mean, it's the Paula Bennett reheated discourse, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for those of us who lived through the previous national government, we had a social development minister who kept talking about her own experience on the benefit. I think to me that also shows the limitations of lived experience, and also that we don't really know exactly what's going on in people's lives. I assume Louise Upston probably had a lot of support that allowed her to, get back up on feet and have a safety net. Obviously, we've got to remember that when she was on a benefit, the cost of living situation and equality was very different in the country. So we can't compare being on the benefit 30 years ago to now. And so I think, but to your earlier point, I agree that the saddest thing about all of this is that the evidence, the cost of not addressing child poverty is out there, and it all boils down to political choices. I mean, look, again, I go back to my comment about how the government is saying spending $3 billion on child poverty is unrealistic when they've spent the same amount basically on tax cuts for landlords. I think that just talks to me about a government that's got its priorities upside down. And I got asked earlier today, by journalists, wouldn't some of these tax cuts trickle down to to people in poverty, as if though we haven't gone down through that same argument and those same issues again and again since the 80s, this idea that the tax cuts will trickle down and suddenly landlords are going to cut their rent by half. It's not, it didn't happen before, it doesn't happen in other countries, and it won't happen here either.
Do you think that when there's stories about this, putting just a raw dollar amount on this, hey, look, if we spend this, we solve child poverty, that your average person's mind just goes to pouring a big bucket of money at the problem rather than looking at things that could help that, like looking at market rents, looking at the cost of childcare, the cost of doctors' visits, all of those things that would all go towards improving that poverty situation for people, as you said, not just children, but anyone in that poverty cycle. It's not just giving them a wad of 50s and going, you got it from here, buddy. Ruffle the hair, on you go.
I agree, and it's a matter of doing both, right? It's like we've got to lift incomes above the poverty line, and at the same time, I think too, you're completely right around some of those other interventions and hard discussions we have to have around, why is it that we allow for unlimited rent increases each year? Why is it that there isn't enough public housing? Why is it that general practitioners are treated as a business as opposed to a core public good? Those are all interventions we have to make. At the same time, we also can't ignore that boosting incomes does have that like immediate relief and material difference. So I think it's a bit of both. And at the same time, like I also think we do talk about pouring a bunch of money onto other parts of our political infrastructure, like the transport, government, how it's about the billions of dollars they're spending on roads. And so like, why can't we do the same for poverty? Why can't governments proudly do a stand-up saying they've just invested, billions of dollars on addressing child poverty in the same way they talk about a bloody road? But at the same time, I do think you're right that where the more transformational interventions will go will be on things like no longer treating housing as a commodity and as a public good, and equally not treating parts of the healthcare system as a business profit. We've got to do both things.
We've been talking in the last week or so, Ricardo, based on a story we did last week, again, about a UBI. How could a UBI fit into this scenario to help out with children / people in poverty?
Yeah, I'm a bit of we've got, in the Greens, we've got our version called a guaranteed minimum income, which kind of acknowledges that like there's kind of different top ups we would have to do for things like for caregivers, disabled people, etc. I think a UBI or a guaranteed minimum income only works if you set the baseline above the poverty line. Like, this is why I was critical of other political parties who came out with the UBI, because it was like really well below the poverty line. And then that's just middle class welfare, because it basically assumes like your job plus that UBI. What I'm really a fan of is UBS, which is Universal Basic Services, which is what Chewy was kind of talking about when it came to like general practice and other things, which is this idea that like we have a list of basic services, and those get treated as free public services and not profit, and we invest into them, via tax reform, etc. And I think to me that kind of goes back to that notion of like, we can't just keep pouring money into things that are basically for profit, because those people that control those services just can hike up the cost of literal living. So I think to me it's a bit of a kind of UBI plus UBS to really kind of nail all parts of the system.
Excellent. Hey, before you go, maybe you could give us a bit of an exclusive. What's the word on the Waka jumping conversation around Darling Tana? Anything you guys talking about? Because I know it's sort of been approved by the members at the moment. Has there been anything else said?
Well, I mean, the latest development, and I'm probably going to give a boring answer because we're still sifting through the sort of consequences of the court decision. But as you'll know, the court basically ruled in our favor as of Friday. And over the past few days, what we've been doing is just mulling over exactly how we're going to move forward. And there's a few things to consider here. But basically, our intentions remain the same in that we don't think Darling should be an MP. And so we're finding ways to kind of act post the court ruling to kind of see what we can do to basically stick to our principles that we talked about before to do this to court.
Ricardo, I think you need to take some lessons from the National Party as to how not to answer a question, because you just gave us a very, very good answer, and we now are more informed that you're supposed to say things like, well, what's said around our table doesn't get shared outside of that room, and you didn't do it. So I don't know, maybe Mr. Lutz.
I mean, I think I gave you a pretty generic answer for what it's worth.
It's still something. It's nice. It's good to know.
Yeah.
What I hear.
We also
but
want to be
honest,
transparent and upfront.
Well,
Right.
when we started hearing about this, I was kind of the opinion that, I don't know, if like, because the Greens were so keen not to do the Waka jumping thing, you know, when it originally came out pretty strongly against it. I mean, are you really going to waste it on this? Because it's not going to make any difference in Parliament. Yeah. So I don't know. I to hear you say that you're still looking for kind of your original co-offer and how to work through that, it's nice to hear. It's nice to hear someone with some, can't think of the word, Chewy, morals, standing by what they say. So it's good.
And we've got to remember this is a unique situation to the ones that many of the people who posted were contemplating, right? And I think that's why I think the situation is unique. But yeah, well, thank you. Look, we tried to, we genuinely have been trying to be as transparent as we can through a very messy process. So yeah, I'm sure you'll hear about this in the coming days or
First.
weeks.
Will we hear about it first? That's all we want to know. We'll get it first. Yeah. Yeah. I'll take that as a yes. I'll take that as a yes. Hey, Ricardo, thanks for joining us tonight, mate. Thanks for giving us some time as you're landing. We appreciate it heaps, man.
No worries.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thanks, mate. Ka kite.
Sounds like we got an exclusive on the way, Chewy. Did you get that as well?
Yeah, definitely. That is what I think they call in the biz a rock solid verbal contract. So yeah, we look forward to that.
Let's go to some of these chats. We didn't get to them at the start of the show just because Ricardo's obviously was waiting for us live there. Gareth says, sorry I'm late, just walking the dog. Is that a euphemism? How could you use that as a euphemism? Sorry, dude, just walking the dog. Is that like, you know, I was in the bathroom, dropping the kids off to the pool, just walking the dog? Is that what it, no? Probably just actually walking the dog. Is that what you're suggesting? In your face. Okay. When I worked at More FM, we had a sweeper that was like downloading new music now and all the little sound effects. And one of the hosts, when he had to go to the toilet, he goes, okay, guys, gotta go download a new music file. That was his little euphemism there. Peter says we should all be wearing party hats tomorrow. I always wear my party hat. Always. So yeah, you guys should all wear yours too. Chewy, you're wearing yours. I see that. The cake is a lie, says Gold. Mr. Arvids just confirming that DS is the worst. Wooming says national equals fuck official advice, only vibes, please. Yeah, isn't it fascinating when she goes, we disagree with the official advice, and you're like, oh, hi, Captain Obvious. You didn't actually need to tell us that because that's the byline.
We know.
I think. Peter, national, the know-it-all drunk uncle of New Zealand politics. Is that national or is that New Zealand first with the literal know-it-all drunk uncle? I don't know. Either way. Kiwi Bird says national cuts jobs, also national get a job, bro. Yeah, by the way, I didn't say it officially, but thank you for all those super chats that have been through. Yeah, that's the classic, isn't it? Just go and get a job. Hang on, as the economy you're looking after is going to increase in unemployment. Yeah. Reese says late fee with apologies. Thank you for your super chat, Reese. And then Lurchified, very generous $17 super chat. Thank you for that. Upston did not respond with policy or evidence. It was a political, philosophical, wealth creation is a given requirement. Wealth distribution is the key to ending poverty. Very nice.
I think this is key for me, is that every time they talk about growing the economy and that sort of thing, they're talking about wealth creation and job creators and that sort of thing. It's very much, if the guys at the top are doing well, it'll trickle down to everybody else. You know, if we don't give these guys these breaks, then they won't make the jobs. And they don't sort of put any consideration into the moment the going gets tough for these guys, they ditch all the jobs. It's like this abusive relationship. They're always trying to downsize. They're always trying to become more efficient. They're always trying to trim their payroll budget. And I don't see, like, what is the government here for? Is it to look after business or is it look after people? And it's the people that make up the businesses and it's the people that make up the economy. And I think we're getting a really good example of that now with the absolute panic mode reaction that there's been a couple of stories about how Central Wellington is dying. And now Nicola Willis has demanded all government departments cancel work from home.
We'll play that clip.
It's just remarkable.
The thing about the whole trickle-down economics is it has not worked anywhere ever anywhere. There's no evidence. And like I used to always say when people talk, well, let's try trickle up. If trickle down don't work, how about we give the people at the bottom all the money, because then they have to spend it. The people at the top, and this is the thing, Chewy, these people who make more jobs, cool, they make more jobs, but then they also increase their wealth exponentially. And then, as you say, when the going gets tough, they cut all the jobs, but they're left with their exponential growth and their hoarded piles of gold coins that they can keep sitting on. And when the wealthy make more money, it doesn't get spent.
No,
Not like people at the bottom. People at the bottom have to spend the money. People at the top choose to spend their money. So let's try a trickle up for a while, I reckon.
Yeah. And look, that's a great one to pop up whenever someone goes, oh, true socialism or true communism's never worked. It's never worked. And it's like, well, yeah, neither's trickle down, but you seem to like that.
Well, the truth is, in its absolute purest sense, most isms read okay. Capitalism reads okay. The most popular product will make it through and will be a market leader. Except what happens is they privatize their profits, and then they socialize or nationalize their losses. When COVID hit, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have done this, but when COVID hit, all of the businesses, all those fucking boomers now who are I had them in my bloody Twitter feed over the weekend. It was unbelievable. Who are now complaining about Jacinda and that kind of stuff, all kept alive with their business, business payments, and their staff kept going because the government helped them. In America, the car manufacturers got given huge helps by the government. So when they make lots of money, they put it in their mattress and they sleep on it. And when they lose lots of money, they either write off the losses and some smaller company pays for them, or they get help from the government because they're too big to fail. So the isms in their purest sense, communism, socialism, capitalism, if you just read the dictionary definition, they all seem like they've got some kind of value. The problem is people get involved with them, and people are fallen, people are failed, and all of them become corrupt not because of the ism, but because of the people who run that ism. That's the problem.
I saw, we're going on quite the tangent now, Pat.
Okay.
I saw an interesting thing on Blue Sky earlier today, and it was like and this is maybe from the American frame of mind, but the real problem that people have is that they're comparing communism versus democracy, right? And it's not. Communism is is the rival for capitalism, not for democracy. Or maybe it's socialism or something like that. But it's not necessarily the political process. It's how your economy works.
Yeah.
Or doesn't work, depending. But yeah, when they say that communism isn't an answer, look, we've been doing capitalism for a little while now. And where we're at, this late stage capitalism doesn't seem to be much of an answer for anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell you, we all get a little bit sick and tired of capitalism and all being told to buy products and, advertising and all that kind of stuff. But there is a new product that's come out recently. Sure, you know where I'm going now, don't you? That was smooth, eh?
Mm-hmm.
A new product that's come out recently. And I think we should perhaps maybe see if they want to sponsor the show. It's called the Alexa. Let's have a look. Maybe you'd want to purchase one of these as well for yourself. Oh, gosh.
Oh, fucking hell.
Why did that not play?
That's quite the jump scare.
PC, everything's on. Why did it not? There's no noise. Have you got noise? I've got no noise with that.
No, I got no audio on that one.
Oh, that's very strange. Very strange indeed. Yes.
Oh, the whole show hangs on that.
Let's go and see. I'm just now worried that the other things aren't gonna play out. Stand by, caller. Do you want to do some chats or something while you do, Chewy?
So some mad padding.
Yeah.
I think I've got.
I just want to make sure my end's actually working.
Okay. Okay. No worries.
So that's what I'm doing.
Okay. I'm looking at the chats now. I am going to apologize here. This is probably one of the. Well, I don't know, Pat. I don't know about putting up these chats. Because there has been a conversation going on in the chat about housing waiting lists and the preference for supporting families with children over other people. the comments are real close to advocating for eugenics almost.
Yeah.
And I'm not super happy with them. Do you want me to put them up anyway? Or
I know what you're talking about because I saw them. Let me just see. Oh, there we go. We're back again.
No, I've got audio there.
My computer just went. I think it's okay to put them up. I think the point that being the underlying point is actually okay, because the underlying point that the person is making is, as a single person, they're at the back of the queue for all the help from the government now. And why should kids come first? And the answer is because they're more vulnerable. Yes, there are many vulnerable older people in the world. Yes, they are. But a newborn baby is more vulnerable than a 52-year-old who is looking also for help. Right, let's have a look at the Alexa, shall we?
Hi everyone.
Yay, it's arrived.
Hi everyone, Chris Luxon, TikTok King here.
Alexa, get a here quick.
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
I hope you kept the receipt, babe. Alexa, how much do you think this block of cheese cost?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I imagine it's about there's numbers in my head, but I'm not going to say what they are.
Yo, Lux, do you think you're meeting all your targets?
It's not about the frickin' targets.
You what, mate?
It's not about the frickin' targets. It's not about the frickin' targets.
Okay. This is all.
It's not about the.
I think it's very good for the Labour Party because they're taking the piss, and I think it's a good path to take, And I also think those quote lines that he has said, we're not going to use the voter like an ATM. It's not about the frickin' targets, and we showed you this last week when he said it is about goals for something else. It's not about targets; they're the same thing. So it's important to keep those in the forefront of our minds, I think, and what he's been saying. Look, Chewy, I don't mind if you put those chats up or not. I mean, let me just say this: no amount of super chat guarantees it being placed on screen. We have no obligation to do that whatsoever. But the point that was being made in the chat was, I'm 52, I need help, I'm not getting it. You know what? That's a fine conversation. I didn't see any of the eugenics you're talking about, so maybe it got a bit worse than that. But the reality is, yes, there is a pecking order. Yes, the pecking order normally goes with the most vulnerable first, or at least it should do, whether that's a 92-year-old or a 2-year-old. For those of us kind of in the 40 to 60 bracket, typically, unless we have incredibly serious health issues, we're not considered the most vulnerable because we're not the most vulnerable. So sometimes, sometimes it sucks, but that's the reality. And I guess from being within that position for someone who's 52 and in that position, it sucks more and more and more. Anecdotal evidence always has empathy and always feels so red and raw, and the data is quite cold. Anecdotal evidence is your story to you. And I think telling your story to other people, it's real, it's raw, it's hard, but the data overreaching it will show that the more vulnerable get help first, and that sounds cold-hearted and cold, but it's the reality of how a community works. So if you want to put something, not sure, I'll leave it with you. We can just leave it there.
I will put it up because I think we're having an interesting discussion about here, okay. And I think there are two aspects to this. So please stop giving us super chats. Because it's a fair amount of money that you've put through to get your point across, and
haven't I just answered a point anyway to get it across?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to put them all up in a chunk, and then I'm going to sort of address what I think around them. Okay. So I will give a toss about the kids. When parents stop having more and more, all my life it's been a problem. More and more kids. I'm 52, and this has been a problem all my life. Why should I care when they're the ones not caring about having more kids?
Unknown statement.
Yeah. I'm not left or right. Thank you very much. I stand for me and my rights. I live in a hotel right now. I'm 52, ill, and I'm sat behind people with kids.
Yes.
I would imagine that that's in a queue, in a wait list.
Yeah, wait list for a house.
It's not the kids' fault, but all of my 52 years, we have argued people on welfare having kids. So why should we keep paying if they ain't respecting?
Well, there's a lot of...
Sadly, I have to spend because you banned me. I have not banned you. You haven't been banned.
Okay.
I-
You've never-
so,
and
yeah.
now your message is through. You can stop paying, because if you are someone who's 52 and struggling financially, you should not be giving a percent
keep your money in the
podcast
pocket.
lots of money. Look, the reality is, as I said, your story sounds hard, and it's anecdotal because it's your story, and I have empathy for you, and it can tug at the heartstrings. But the data about who are most in need will probably show these people ahead of you. Like, we went to the emergency room the other day, and guess what? We got in and had to wait 4 or 5 hours because cases came in after us that were more urgent, and so they went in front of us. Sucked for us having to wait longer, but that's the situation.
So here's my view on a couple of these things. This narrative of people on benefit having kids, that has been a classic trope for years in many capitalist societies. The idea of Reagan coming up and talking about welfare queens and all of that sort of thing. And I think that's just a way to pit the poor against the poor. Like, this situation, like, we've talked a lot on this show of whether it's the kid's fault or not, and it doesn't matter, because unless we want to create just a pure underclass of people that are doomed right from conception through to when they die, that's how we do it. There is no war but class war, and if we are blaming other poor people for how our society is set up, rather than looking at how our society is set up and who we vote for and what our politicians do and all of this sort of stuff. It is not right that you, as a 52-year-old with health issues and that sort of thing, should be living out of a hotel. That's monstrous. There should be enough affordable housing for everybody. Okay? And we have shot ourselves in the foot there, because we have incentivized hoarding houses as the only way to get ahead. So if you can't afford a stable of 5 houses, well, guess what, mate? You're staying in a hotel and you're fucked. And there's nothing you can do about that. And that's frustrating. So you look for a victim. And in this case, you're blaming other people that are in shitty situations. It's not... It's not necessarily fair. It's not necessarily right. It doesn't help you out in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But I think we need to fix housing. Housing is a basic human right. I worry about my own parents paying market rents now that they're retired, and they're just going to piss all of their money away. And then what do they do in their really old age? And I worry about that for myself, because of the society that we have created, where we have incentivized hoarding houses. And no government has done anything about that. They all fiddle around the edges. They've disincentivized councils from spending money on social housing. They've stopped spending money on social housing. This government has really stopped trying to improve the flow of housing for the less fortunate. And it's fucked. And it makes me angry. But I am not going to get into a trope of poor people have lots of children and that's their fault, and so they should suffer and their children should suffer. There's a reason it's women and children first.
Yeah. All right. And that's the end of that. And that's the end of interactions there with that person. Right. Tawhiri says, that's the point. It's all a trick. All down. Got that? Saw that we did. I see what you're doing there with the puns for the night. Junk Greg Sailor, the anti-work from home rhetoric that came out today from Lux and Willis was disgusting. We'll play that in just a second. Ryzen says, did you all hear about the GOP North Carolina gubernatorial candidate who said on Porous Site that he was a black Nazi and would like to own slaves? Yeah, that's been all over my feed all weekend. It's just, and he missed the chance to pull out, which his father probably should have done as well, because he's on the ballots now and he can't come out.
Boom.
And Carmel at the Dispatch 2025 in touch. Carmel at the Dispatch 2025 into touch. Gotcha. All right. Let's have a look at that story, shall we? See what this particular Silver Fox has got to say.
Working from home is not an entitlement. That's the government's message to public servants, saying it wants to see more of them back in the office. But the opposition says morale needs to be considered and whether workers want to return after so many layoffs. Today's announcement comes as some Wellington businesses are closing due to a lack of car parks and customers in the CBD. Abby Wakefield reports.
At the end of this week, Egmont Street.
So basically the the government has set up an economic thing that especially with all the layoffs, that all the people in the number of people working in central Wellington has dropped dramatically under this government. And so now they're trying to make people come back into central Wellington so that businesses can survive. And it won't look quite so bad on their ledger sheet. That's what they're about.
Eatery will shut up shop.
17 people have been made redundant.
He says times have been tough recently.
It's a number of issues over the last couple of years. A lot to do with people working from home.
Now the government wants more public sector workers back behind their desk.
I'm really reluctant to say this is the minimum days a week, because that could set out an expectation that you're entitled to a day from home or a half day from home or 2 days from home.
They don't like that word entitled, do they? Like they use it like you're entitled to. It's like if you work it into your contract. Like I sometimes jump on Seek and I have a look at work from home jobs just to see what there is. If that's a part of what people have negotiated, then it's not an entitlement. It's their right, actually, if it's what they've a part of what they've negotiated with their bosses.
Because this is a lifestyle change, we need to approach it with empathy, with understanding, with care, and again, coming back to that why, what it means for a mum and her 3 kids.
The new expectations state that working from home is not an entitlement. It must not compromise performance, and agencies must actively monitor the impact.
So there's no evidence to say it's compromising performance now. If it was compromising performance, I'm sure they'd be talking about it. So it all just sounds like a bit of a mealy-mouthed, mean government again, trying to cover their business is doing terrible in Wellington Central because of you. Because if there was things that weren't performing as well because of working from home, they would be talking about that. They would be saying production or is down by 18% and we need people back in the office. They're not saying that, which means it's not doing it. But they're just looking for a way to make it look like they're helping Central Wellington.
And report back to the Public Service Commission.
This office is very social and sometimes that's quite distracting. You can easily have conversations that go on for 20 to 40 minutes, but they've got nothing to do with work.
Here in Wellington, you only have to walk down Lambton Quay on a Monday or Friday, observe the fluctuation in the number of people swiping into offices each day, or talk to a cafe owner to see the impact.
They're the ones that have basically...
They should have finished that sentence. The impact of our policies. She left that part of the sentence off, Julie.
Basically slashed 5,000 jobs in the last 6 months in Wellington. That's what's hammered the Wellington economy. It's got nothing to do with working from home.
Other public sector workers told One News that raising a young family without a flexible working arrangement would be a logistical nightmare, and they can't afford to buy lunch in town anyway.
Yeah.
How would you describe the mood in the public sector at the moment?
Well, I'm just grateful to have a role. I am grateful to be working, but it's getting less and less favourable.
Grateful for a job in unfavourable times. Abby Wakefield.
So there you go, Chewy. The government knows they've crapped all over the central Wellington business district by removing 5,000 workers from that area. And now they're going, crap, how are we going to stop our city from going under? Hey, let's force all the people who have negotiated being able to work from home back into offices. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, so I think that's the thing, is that with COVID and when we all started to open up after COVID and that sort of thing, work from home was seen as a very attractive thing. So it was built into people's jobs. Like that's the agreements that they've reached and that sort of thing. And I think once again, the government has looked at this. Holy shit, we're getting lashed over Central Wellington hospo, absolutely tanking. What can we do? This can't be our fault. Let's blame work from home. And I think they have completely overlooked so many things. There's the perception that work from home is less efficient. It's not. You can clock in and do a full 8-hour workday in an office and still only work 4 hours. 4 hours of useful work. You know, and what people have found when they work from home is that they are able to structure their day and produce the same, if not more work.
Well, and that's what that worker was saying, that you come into the office and you stand around the water cooler for 20 minutes talking about non-related work stuff. Let me just say this one more time, and I've said this about half a dozen times of this government. When they want to absolve themselves of them making bad decisions with a department, they say, well, this is completely up to the CEs. The chief executives decide that. If they're okay with that, then we're okay with that. And when they start to look bad, like Central Wellington is dying, all of a sudden, Chewy, it's not up to the CEs anymore. The government's coming in and telling the CEs, get your people back to work. See, what they do is they basically move away from awkward, hard conversations about, stopping people from working, laying people off by going, well, that's up to the CE. That's up to the CE. That's up to the CE, the chief executive. And then when whatever's going on embarrasses them, then they basically are saying, screw the CE, we'll make the decision now. It's double-faced. Is that the right thing? It's two-faced, even better. Two-faced. Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple of other quite likely scenarios, right? You work from the public service, you work in a central city office, you've got a young kid or two, that sort of thing, work from home, you can have your kids at home more often, right? So you're saving on daycare. You're also saving on commuting time, transport costs, fuel, whatever. I don't know how many of you know Central Wellington, but not a lot of people actually live there. Certainly not young professionals and that sort of thing. They live in Lower and Upper Hutt and Porirua and that sort of thing. So now, guess what? Rush hour's back because Wellington's public transport is also fucked and has been fucked for quite a few years. The trains aren't reliable.
Is that a technical term?
Yes, fucked. Bunted, if you will. That sort of thing. The other thing, because there's always another thing that I have about this story, right, is I think it was Radio New Zealand interviewed a couple of business owners from Central Wellington and that sort of thing. And two thoughts sprung to mind. It's like one of the guys, he had a fruit and vegetable business in the middle of Cuba Street, sold up because the property was worth so much more, he got just moved out. But he said that he was having a booming business in the eastern suburbs where people live and work from home. And yet he hasn't put that together yet. And then the second thought I had is with all of these businesses going, holy shit, Central Wellington's fucked because all the workers are gone. Who did you vote for in the last election? That is the context that I want to hear when you're whinging about your business.
Yeah.
Like business will always look after itself. It will always adapt. Like Egmont Street Eatery is nowhere near the public sector part of town. It's all the way down on Courtney Place or near Courtney Place. It's in one of the laneways there. And it's been tough for hospo down that area since COVID. Pomodoro Bakery, a very nice but very fancy bakery, went under and blamed cycleways, which are nowhere near that business. They are also not near the public service sector of town. So sometimes businesses just fail. They don't adapt. The environment changes. Costs go up. All of these things have happened to hospo. And with everybody, not just public sector workers, but everybody feels the cost of living crisis. And they go, can I afford to go to the cafe 4 days a week? Can I afford to take me and my partner out for dinner as often as I once did? And I think everybody will go, fuck no, I can't do that anymore. They wanted us to tighten our belts. And so we did. And now everybody's freaking out.
Yeah. Yep.
If you're the government, that's on you. It was on the previous government. You said it was. Every economic factor was on Labor. And now you're going, well, it's this. No. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. It's fucking on you. You did this.
Lots of chats about this at the moment. Junk Rig Sailor. I don't work for the government, but I absolutely love work from home. I concentrate better and work more efficiently, and I don't waste 2 hours per day stuff in traffic. Yeah, I love it as well. And the other thing for me is, this is me working. So it means I can, I took the dog up to the park today in the sun at midday. But if I was working for someone else, I would still be doing my hours now. You're basically able to, set up your timetable as it works best. If the kids need something, I'm more available. It's a blessing. Toss off, Nicola. You're not my boss. Toss off, Nicola. Okay. Mr. Arvids, I think you'll find that work from home helps people lock in, as the kids say. Chris says, if you have the option of working from home and you get sick, you continue being productive whilst avoiding making others sick. Yeah, that's true, actually.
Another huge fringe benefit.
Yeah. So you've got a cold or a cough and cold that you would infect other people. You wouldn't do it so much, and you could keep working with that cough and cold from home. It's it's very true. This one here is from Wooming, says National are the party of multinational businesses. Yeah, and that's where they make that. They always talk about being the party of business. They're not. You know, we've said this for a long time. They talk about Luxon's business credentials. Luxon is not a businessman. He's a board member. Right? Luxon hasn't started up that business and worked at it.
Built something.
No, he's a board member and an employee. That's his business credentials. He might have been a high-powered, high-profile employee, but he's an employee and a board member. When I hear people talking about a business owner, I think about the dude and dudette who have spent 10 years building something. Now they've got 3 branches and it's started from the ground. He's done nothing like that. Nothing. Because I care, they asked us to work from home. We have to share desks at the other building as the other building is closed, so she can go take a jump.
So how much savings do you think government departments and businesses have saved when they downsize their office space because everybody's working from home?
Yep.
So again, I think it's not about Wellington Hospo. It's about commercial landlords.
Yeah, interesting. No, interesting point. Mike says, I work with people all over the country, mainly in Christchurch, and I'm in Wellington. So in the office, I have to sit in team meetings all day. 0 point me being at an office. Alice says, national, we blame everyone else but our perfect policies. And that's the, with Mike. And that's the end of those ones. And can I just also say now, pause. The POM 88, Chewy? $200.
Oh,
unreal!
Damn, my dude.
Our previous biggest super chat was $100, which we got on the night of the election from an ACT voter. Don't know if you remember that, Chewy. Hey, yes. Big hairy fellas. Here's a few shekels towards the channel expansion. Maybe we need some bald-faced sisters. Nah. With a beard? No beard? Okay. I'm just going to say again, I know all of you heard this. The reason it's called Big Hairy News has got nothing to do with hair. The original idea was, you have a big, hairy, audacious goal. I've got a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. Like and I thought that using the big, hairy, like the big, hairy, audacious news stories, that's what we'll cover. That's what it was based in, but it's kind of grown. But we
shot that in the face immediately by both having big beards.
Yeah. Make sure that middle management, the puppies, get a bonus and a scratch behind the ear. Hey, in all seriousness, that's really generous. Like I said, no one's ever done that kind of thing before, POM. So thank you so much. And absolutely, it'll go. And we still have plans in place. We are still working on things. I was emailing people over the weekend for various bits and bobs. So thank you so much. Lovely, lovely, lovely and generous. All right, Chewy. We're actually going pretty long at the moment, so let's just rip into the next couple of stories. How about this one? Shut up. This one you'll love, because old Seymour, our mate Seymour, David Seymour, who's counting down the days until he gets to put his name on over the Winston thing.
Oh, Jesus.
He's got this ministry, right? The Ministry of Regulations, because he just wants to get rid of as many regulations as he can. Well, a regulatory impact assessment of David Seymour's treaty principle bills has failed a quality assurance test carried out by his own Ministry for Regulation. The Ministry for Regulation says not enough work has been done to assess the possible impacts of the treaty principles bill for it to be passed into law. ACT Party leader, I can see you smiling without even looking at the screen, Chewy. I'm looking at the other screen. ACT Party leader David Seymour is the minister responsible for both the Regulation Ministry and the Treaty Principles Bill, which is part of his Associate Justice portfolio. A regulatory impact statement prepared by the Ministry of Justice failed a quality assurance test undertaken by a panel with members from both the Justice and Regulation Ministries. It said that ministerial direction from Seymour and time constraints had limited the range of policy options that could be considered and the depth of analysis done. In-depth analysis involved testing the assumptions underpinning the problem, definition, investigating unintended consequences, and undertaking consultation. There's a bunch of stuff in there. I think what I might actually do is actually just go straight to the RIS. Here it is here. So this is the regulatory impact statement, right? Let me read you some things straight from the statement. So it's just gone through and it talked about, this is in confidence, people. It says it on the paper, so don't tell anybody about this.
Just amongst us.
Just between me and you. So this is the executive summary, and it kind of lays out what's going on. You know, it says this is the coalition agreement, said they'd do this, and the objectives were to generate, you know, greater certainty about how it works, yada, 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 yada. And then it comes to this. Although the proposal to introduce the bill could have some value, we consider the status quo is more beneficial. Under this option, the courts and the Waitangi Tribunal would continue to articulate the meaning of the treaty principles in line with the existing legislation and practice. This option would uphold treaty obligations to the same extent as they are now. More from the RIS. So it's talking again about what's happening, what's going on, the final content, etc. goes this. However, their description, those who are doing the treaty principles bill, in the policy proposed is inconsistent with the treaty, te tiriti. It does not accurately reflect Article 2, which affirms the continuing exercise of tino rangatiratanga, restricting the rights of hapu and iwi to those specified in legislation or agreement with the Crown, implies that tino rangatiratanga is derived from kawanatanga. It reduces Indigenous rights to a set of ordinary rights that could be exercised by any group of citizens. I'm just going to do this and I'll keep reading. An interpretation of Article 2 that does not recognise the collective rights held by iwi and hapu or by the distinct status of Māori as the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, calls into question the very purpose of the treaty. You know how they said this is not a referendum on the treaty? This is not a referendum on the treaty. Well, this, according to the RIS, calls into question the very purpose of the treaty and its status in our constitutional arrangements. The status quo also provides a higher degree of certainty about what the treaty principles are. So right now, what we've got right now provides more certainty as to what the treaty principles are and how they operate in New Zealand law. That's it. So that's come from, in part, David Seymour's own regulations ministry, who have gone, sister, this is not happening in the way that you want. But guess what, Chewie? They will, what's that word we're looking for? Ignore it.
I live for a day that David Seymour gets thoroughly regulated by his own Ministry for Regulation.
Regulated.
Just regulated so hard. And they're right. We said this right from the get-go, that we had to be really careful about the language about this bill, that it wasn't, that he was going to say it's not about changing the treaty, it's changing the principles. The principles change how the treaty is interpreted.
He would say it's defining the principles, not even changing the principles.
And that was always going to be his sneaky little jump through the window, don't come through the front door about fucking with the treaty.
Should we say it again? So this is from the regulatory impact statement. The status quo, how things are right now, provides a higher degree of certainty about what the treaty principles are and how they operate in New Zealand law. That's right now. So what they're trying to do will be a lesser degree. It won't be as technical. It won't be as clear what they're proposing, Chewie.
This shower of idiots are just real bad at this.
Yeah. Anything in the chat? Mr. Arvid says, who would have thought that a
shitty
bill would be
shit?
Shove it, Seymour. Are you
And-
the
and
person
look,
who
and
gets to, are you the person who gets to swear? Is that what you're doing? You're
Yeah,
making that clear for
absolutely.
yourself. Okay.
And let's be clear, this shitty bill, this fucking dead duck, is going to get paraded up and down in front of our faces for the next 6 months, even though everybody says it's going nowhere. We're just going to spend that money. We're just going to drag this rotten corpse of David Seymour's Atlas bad idea up and down our mediascape for 6 months. That's going to be great. Everybody's going to get on well. Everybody's going to make educated and considered comments. Everyone's going to make sure that they're respectful of each other. It's going to be awesome. Thanks, David.
And remember, we'll say this again, even though we've just read it too. He says it's not about the treaty. Well, an interpretation of Article 2 that does not recognise the collective rights held by iwi. So an interpretation of Article 2 that doesn't look at Article 2 like it is today, right? So a new way of looking at Article 2. Yep, got all that. And then calls into question the very purpose of the treaty. So if you reinterpret Article 2 to not talk about the collective rights held by iwi, and hapu, or the distinct status of Māori as the indigenous people of New Zealand, what you're doing is you're calling into question the very purpose of the treaty and its status in our constitutional arrangements. But of course, Chewie, it's not about the treaty. Hey, that's what we keep getting told. It's not about the treaty. No, it's not about the treaty. Gold also says, has the Ministry of Regulation just affirmed that David Seymour is indeed the worst example of a human being? I guess so. And there's one very quickly from Tawhiri. Chewie's rants today warms my anarcho-communist heart. Right. We've got one more story to go, and it's probably the one that was going to take us the longest, but we're at 10 o'clock, so we probably won't. I want to talk about the assisted dying law. Now, I'll be straight up from the start. I have real conflict on this law. And it's a personal story. I thought that my mum passed away from motor neuron disease. And when she finally passed, it took about 3 years from woe to go, I was always thinking, I'd have a really clear understanding of what I think about assisted dying once I see what happens with mum. And I have to be really honest with you, it really, really confused me even more. About a week and a half before mum passed, she said to one of us, she was wheelchair bound at that stage because motor neuron disease basically stops your neurons firing and it stops you, so she couldn't really move. She didn't lose her voice, which was great because a lot of people lose their voice as well. But apparently one of my sisters said they were going out for a walk and she had her electric wheelchair, and mum said to one of my sisters, if I could, I'd throw myself off a bridge right now. So she'd got to that point, right? And I hear that and I kind of go, of course, mum should be able to, for want of a better thing, go out the way she wants to go out. But for me, selfishly, I also look at that time, the last 24, 36, 48 hours that we spent with her in hospital. And when she passed, I stayed and everyone else left to go start organising things. And I stayed with mum after she had passed. And I ended up, helping the funeral director sort of wrap her and get her ready to go on to her next stage. And that's sort of my personal specialist time from when she passed. It was after she passed in that situation. And so I'm stuck there kind of going, mum would throw herself off a bridge. She should be able to make this. And then I'm going, selfishly, I don't want to say the best time, the most special time was me and the lazy boy. Mum had passed, right? She was no longer with us. And I was in the lazy boy beside her for about 45 minutes, actually having a bit of a nap. And if we had done it the other way, I wouldn't have had that. So I'm really torn on this. Like I have real conflict about the thing overall, just to lay out where my thoughts are on the assisted dying. I've got some stuff to play, Chewie. Do you have any commentary on that to start with? Have you got anything you want to add?
I think the fact that you're conflicted about this just shows that you're a functioning human. That's difficult, Like, it shouldn't be easy to let someone end their own life. But what you're describing, like if I was suffering from motor neuron disease, that sounds like a waking nightmare to me. And I think the one thing I take away from all of this, make your wishes known way before.
Yeah.
To everybody that'll listen to you, what your personal limits are. Because that has been the discussion around this law, is how to stop people taking advantage of people that can't speak up for themselves, that can't make their wishes known anymore.
And that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, there's a new members bill going through to look to get rid of the 6 month. Should we just go have a bit of a listen? I'm only going to play, I had like 3 or 4 or 5 clips. I'll probably only play 2 plus a very short one, because I thought the first thing we could do is actually play this first clip, which is only about 90 seconds, which is actually Jack explaining what the current status is with this bill and where it's at.
As of late this week, a total of 964 people have died by legally sanctioned euthanasia in New Zealand. So that's about 1 New Zealander every day. After years of campaigning, 2/3 of New Zealand voters voted in support of the End of Life Choice Act in the 2020 referendum. And in November 2021, the law came into effect.
That gives them comfort, just knowing that that choice is there, even though they might not take it.
Te Whatu Ora publishes annual reports on assisted dying in New Zealand. In the first 5 months with the new law, there were more than 200 applications and a total of 66 assisted deaths in New Zealand. In the year that followed, there were 807 applications and 328 deaths. And in the most recent year to April, the numbers increased. 834 applications with 344 deaths. The demographic breakdown records stark differences between different groups. So last year, 82% of those who died by...
This is really interesting. The race breakdown or the ethnic breakdown, it seems to be something that Europeans, Pākehās, are like, yep, we'll top ourselves, whereas other cultures have a different look on, I guess, the passing of life from one to another.
It's really
assisted
interesting.
Death were Pākehā, just 4% were Māori, 2% were Asian, and Pacific peoples made up less than 0.5%. When the End of Life Choice Act...
So I think actually that's our first point. So there's just some facts and figures around it in there as well. We'll go straight to, I just got to make sure we get the right clip now because I'm going to drop some 441. Yep, that's it. So the Todd Stephenson is the guy who's kind of championing this from ACT. And it's actually, I don't say this often about ACT people, but it's quite an interesting conversation if you want to go check it out for yourself. There are some times where Jack challenges him about not having an opinion, and he's just basically like, well, I don't have an opinion on this. It's actually quite a it's quite a reasonable conversation of toing and froing between Jack and Mr. Stephenson. What we're going to jump in is one of the things you were talking about, Chewie, is about speaking up for those who don't speak up for themselves. So there is a thing called a competency gap in the testing for it, and we'll just talk to that first of all and have a look what they're saying about that.
So 50 people who qualified for an assisted death last year and had been assessed by medical practitioners were then unable to proceed to an assisted death because they were deemed to have lost competency. Would you support changes on the competency checks?
No, I want to keep the regime basically as it is. Again, there are a lot of checks and balances, and so being competent is one of the main criteria, and I think that needs to remain.
As the law stands, doctors are not allowed to raise the prospect of an assisted death as an option for terminally ill.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. So if you're terminally ill, a doctor can't say to you, well, there is the assisted dying option. They're not allowed to legally bring that option to you. You have to bring it to them.
I think that would come under their oath as well, right?
Yeah, well, but that's the whole point about this. The cause no harm, if that's what it is. How does anyone, commit something that's going to end someone's life? So I don't know, but that's part of the law right now is that doctors aren't allowed to say, there's that assisted dying thing. It has to go the other way. That's a legality of it.
Ill patients. Is the so-called gag clause appropriate?
Look, I've got an open mind on that. It's certainly not something my bill is aiming to address, but people have raised that issue. In fact, I was in a meeting last week when that was raised, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at. Again, we've also, though, got to balance the concerns that when the bill was passed at the time around coercion and making sure people are completely informed of all of their options. One of the other things I do like about our bill is that actually as part of the discussions, healthcare professionals do have to talk about all of their end-of-life choice options. So they are actually prevented a lot of information as they go through this process.
But you don't have a position on the gag clause?
Not at this stage. I do want to talk to people who have raised it. And again, it's usually members of the medical community.
See, he sounds quite balanced. Like I'm just being honest about this guy who happens to be an ACT. It's quite a genuine sort of a conversation between two people.
So yeah, I want to talk to them a bit more.
I mean, if you're in a position to put forward a members' bill and you think, you have strong enough thoughts on the prospect of an assisted death, shouldn't you have a position on something like the gag clause?
No, well, let me talk about how my members' bill.
I will ask
because I think that's important. But look, as I said, I have an open mind. We're going to obviously have the review, which will wind up in November. There'll be opportunity for people to raise other issues, and as I said, happy to talk to people about what they've raised. And as I said, we may be able to make further adjustments.
I will. Don't worry.
All right. So there is more to come. Anything you want to jump in with before we get to the next one, Joe?
Yeah, look, I was going to say, you know me, Pat, I'll jump on ACT any day for any reason. I don't see a problem with his answer there.
Yeah.
It sounds like someone with an open mind that is going to listen to practitioners about their positions.
Well, here's the strange thing. There's this guy in government saying, I'll listen to the experts. Maybe that's why it feels not such a mad answer.
That's why it's weird. That's why it's
strange,
weird. I haven't heard it for a while. That's why it's weird.
Of course, one of the concerns that was laid out at the start was family coercion. You know, like if Nana's sitting on a 6-bedroom house in the middle of Remuera or Māori Hill or whatever, and it's worth a couple of mil, they might just want to shuffle her along. And apparently there is one case at the moment in the courts around this family coercion situation.
So there is an ongoing investigation at the moment into a complaint that someone was possibly subjected to family coercion. We checked, that complaint hasn't been fully processed yet by the authorities. But if that complaint is upheld, what responsibility do you think the state bears in facilitating the death of someone who might have been pressured into it?
Look, I think we need to obviously understand what the exact complaint was. But look, I think I'd come back to the point, the fact that we actually have this really rigorous regime and all of these safety measures in place means we know something about that, and the fact that people can actually bring forward their concerns and they're looked into. Look, I think this is a very sensitive area because, we are actually allowing the state to assist someone with a terminal illness who is going to die to have an assisted death. So I think there's a lot of responsibility here.
By the nature of assisted dying, though, would you accept that there is no way for us to fully, wholly know if people who have died by an assisted death might have been feeling a sense of coercion or pressure at the time?
Look, we can never know completely, but again, I'll go back, Jack. This is a very rigorous process. There's a first assessment, an independent assessment, and then a further discussion. So, I think all of the steps are in place, and I think what the data you actually have talked about shows that, there isn't big issues in this area.
Why do you think so few patients are being referred to a psychiatrist?
Again, that's on the advice of those medical professionals making that assessment. They decide whether a psychiatrist is needed. Obviously, in most cases, that's not required. But again, we do see people being referred, and again, that's part of the safety mechanisms in this legislation.
Right, number 2. There you go, Chewy. I wasn't going to show that one, but we have got enough time. I know we've got to be out of here by 10:30 because that's the rules. But one more clip to play. Do you want to add anything in? So the coercion thing is the thing that most people are concerned about. Pushing old Nana or granddad or dad or whoever it is, a bit faster than maybe they want to do it. Because there's always this thing as well of the sort of implicit or explicit coercion as well. If unhealthy person X or, terminal person X feels like they're kind of getting the hint that the family's ready for them to go, if they feel like they're being a burden. So there's all those things as well, which is often part of the concern around this sort of thing.
That's a common thing from the very elderly, is that they don't want to be a bother and they don't want to be a burden, and that becomes a feedback loop in their own head, and they think that that's the only option. That might not be the view that's shared by their family at all. So, I mean, I think that's when they're talking about, hey, look, there needs to be a psychiatric assessment, they need to be of a sound mind. It's all of these things that are quite important. But yeah, it's such a tricky subject. Yeah, I'm still conflicted. When this law first started going through the select committee and that sort of thing, I was very pro it. I was like, yep, that makes sense, because I was looking at it from my own point of view.
Yeah.
Like I said, like if I had something like motor neuron disease or something, I got locked in my own body and my brain was still good, that sounds like hell to me. So I would want out. And then this is why it's so important to read other people's opinion. Then I read thoughts from people in the disabled community.
Yeah, which is why I put that chat up from Sun saying the same thing.
Yeah. And they had a very different opinion from me. And I read that and I was like, oh shit, this is something that I had not considered.
Yeah.
What happens if society decides that you're too much bother? Could this be weaponized against me in some way?
Part of this conversation, which we're not playing, is Jack says to the not minister, I mean, maybe, is he a minister? Anyway, the MP, is this government doing enough to support palliative care? One of the arguments has always been there should be nobody in any kind of palliative care that needs to be in pain. We have enough control over, pain-killing type drugs that there shouldn't have to be anyone being in pain at any stage. And, oh, hello, I'm going to come back. Might come back, might not. Oh, there you go. Hi.
There you go.
So that's something that is a part of this conversation as well, because if you knew your palliative care was going to be, you were going to be comfortable and you had time and versus if your palliative care, you're going to be in pain constantly for, the difference, there's a difference to how you make that decision, I suspect. But anyway, let's get to this last part. We're not going to show that clip, the one that I just talked about. This last one is talking about Mr. Stephenson's new members bill and what does it actually contain.
Let's talk about your members bill. What does it change?
Well, look, I'd been approached by people in the community, and again, I accepted a petition from
a group of people.
From a group of people, signed by over 3,300 New Zealanders, and that related to a particular case of a New Zealander who couldn't access assisted dying because she could not meet the 6-month eligibility criteria. So, at the moment, there's 5 criteria, Jack, you've got to meet. You've got to be over 18 years of age and a New Zealand citizen and resident. You must be able to demonstrate that you're likely to die of a terminal illness within 6 months. You must be in a state of irreversible physical decline. Your pain cannot be controlled in a manner that, you find tolerable, and obviously you must have mental capability to make a decision. And so it really, that's a lot of criteria, but it's this 6 months, being able to prove that within 6 months that you're likely to die of your illness is causing problems.
So that also means, like, let's use my mum as an example again, who got motor neuron disease. As soon as she got that diagnosis, without that 6-month thing, she could have said, I want out now. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm completely torn. I kind of believe everyone's got the right to do whatever they want with themselves. But expanding it out to family and those around you, do we want everyone with the diagnosis to then go, that's it, I'm done? People get diagnosed. I mean, we all know about some very famous people, comedians and stuff, who have been diagnosed with very serious cancer of recent times, who are pushing and fighting and still around a couple of years later. Someone gets that diagnosis, could they just go, all right, do it now? I quite like that 6-month rule, but that's, I guess, what they're looking at. You want to add anything to that before I push play, Joey?
No, nothing to add.
If your members bill was to become law, we would lose the 6-month provision, which would mean that anyone who was experiencing a terminal illness and met those other criteria would qualify for an assisted death.
That's correct.
So what is a terminal illness?
Well, it's obviously a serious illness where you are, as I said, going through a state of physical decline, which is irreversible.
I mean, like diabetes is a terminal illness.
No, but that can be treated. And I think that's when these other criteria, like having a treatment that is acceptable or you can tolerate, is available.
But acceptable and tolerating is always in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yes, but that's why medical professionals make these assessments.
Right.
See what I mean? They're all very reasonable answers from him. He's not pushing an agenda or arguing with Jack, but he has an answer for it. Yes, I agree with you that that's in the eye of the beholder. That's why we have medical experts in there.
When this Act was first passed, critics said that essentially it would be subject to a slippery slope, that by allowing any form of state-sanctioned assisted death would be opening up the doors to changes to eligibility in the future. And that seems to be exactly the case.
I don't accept that, Jack, actually. What we've put in place is a very safe law. And what we're trying to do here, Jack, is actually respect people's dignity in dying, give people who have made this choice with a serious illness the opportunity to decide the time and place of their death, be surrounded by loved ones. I mean, we're actually, if you look at the statistics, 80% of people choose to actually die in a private residence, often surrounded by loved ones, and that's been reported. And so this is really a very humane law that actually, for people with a serious terminal illness can have the option to choose.
If we would lose that 6-month provision, though, I'm to think about it from the perspective of medical technology, and you've worked for pharmaceutical companies. So what's to say that a pharmaceutical company might not introduce a new drug that radically changes someone's prognosis in a period that's a bit longer than 6 months, so say 12 months' time?
The choice is coming back to the individual. If they want to decide that something might come up in the future, that's a decision for them to make. As I said, this is a person's individual decision to make about whether they want to access assisted dying and then work through the criteria. And I think that's the right way to go.
There you go. So they're the clips I'm going to show you from that. It's not, as I said at the start, just putting my cards on the table. I'm very torn about this legislation. I'm very torn about people choosing to assisted dying, to terminate their life. But I can also see it, like I said, I've already explained about my mum. I can see how at one stage, if she wanted it, she could have had it. And then there was this moment with the family that wouldn't have happened if that had gone that way. Although I do also accept that if she had gone down that path, I don't think it was available then, but if she had gone, we could have had that moment still. It would have been just organised, but I don't know whether it would or wouldn't. So Yeah. So
Look,
that's it.
I've got a couple of points to make about this interview. Okay, first of all, we've acknowledged that it is fucking jarring to hear someone go, you know what, I'm going to take some more advice and I'm going to consider it, and it's
For
good
this
to
government, it's
hear.
jarring. Yeah.
It's good to hear, right? And that he should get a pat on the back.
I like. You don't know what you just said. You went. It's good to hear. Like it was a bit of a.
Yeah.
What, is it,
I'm surprised. Look, it should be acknowledged that this was a very good way to front an interview with Jack Tame, because it actually didn't give him that much. Like I think he was definitely there that I am pro this bill, but there are aspects of it that I have not reached a decision on. And I think the parts where he was like, yeah, look, it's a good bill, it does good things. I think he's accentuating the positive aspects of it, of the potential good, and also minimizing the potential bad, which is why that there's a review, right? To make sure that everything is working the way that it should be, which is good. I also want to acknowledge this comment from the chat. Wow, an intelligent ACT MP who can have a conversation. I do need to point out one thing, and this might count against him. This is the guy that was responsible for, like, he had some responsibility with the arts portfolio, and his explanation of his knowledge on arts is that he went to a Broadway show once.
Yeah.
He's also the guy that said maybe, just maybe, we should reserve medication for productive members of society only. So he's not exactly batting 100, but on this interview, he did pretty well.
Yeah, give baby his bottle. All right.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting show. Thanks, guys, for joining us tonight. Bunch of stuff going on tomorrow night. We'll have a look at that stand up today with Luxon. I think normally on Tuesday morning Luxon talks to TVNZ, so we might have a Luxon special. And remember, tomorrow is our 500th show. I normally do this at the start of a Monday show. I apologise that I didn't, but we had to get to Ricardo Menéndez March quite quickly. Steve Hutchinson, Keitha Knowles, Sun Ascendant, and Paul Southgate, all new patrons in the last sort of 7 days. So thanks, guys, for coming on board. If you like what we've done, if you want to be a part of what we're doing, if you want to be a part of who we are, a really good way you can do it. Oh, and also thanks very much again, even though we've already said it, to POM. I mean, $200 super chat is just unheard of, you know. So it's incredibly generous. Thank you so much for that. If you want to be a part of what we do every month, then we'd love to have you on board at patreon.com/Big Hairy News.
Help us settle a debate, whether it be thoughtful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that we need to be wary of. Like the rich have the hand out for rewards, while the many have to work out what they can't afford. And the rest of us ain't paying attention, or maybe have questions we're too worried to mention. Other media is still dwelling on trivial facts, vetting bees from the rice and the mice from the rats, and picking and choosing a warpath to run, and linking ourselves with the hill to die on. It's gotta come down to a welcoming vibe, with an A and a self and a higher in mind. All heavily either this way or that, and we'll be analyzed by what Julie and Pat. With the evil in the world trying to mess with your head, and you're sitting on the couch, you're thinking chivalry's dead. Each night, 2 nights, they're gonna sing you to bed. It's Big Hairy News.
All right, Whānau, so good to be with you. Thanks for the start of the week. Thanks, Chewy. You're a legend as always.
Yeah.
Thanks for keeping us on track. And don't have too much to add. Catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Anything from you, Chewy?
Just thanks for being with us, and thanks for supporting us, and we will see you tomorrow.
We'll see you tomorrow night for our 500th show at Big Hairy News. As I said, we'll acknowledge it. There's no cake. Probably won't do anything special for it, but it's a pretty cool number to get past.
Sell the show, Pat.
Yeah.
Sell the show.
Yeah, it's going to be real boring tomorrow night. Probably shouldn't come, actually, if we're being honest with you. Probably something better on another channel. No. But if you feel like slumming it, come along, come have a chat. We'll see you tomorrow night from 9. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.